Creative Assembly recently attempted to release a beta to fix ongoing issues with Cavalry versus Infantry. I say attempted because unfortunately the bug fixes from the live patch haven't been applied to the beta, so I wouldn't recommend actually playing games on it. But since Creative Assembly asked for feedback, let's dive into some testing with Shock Cavalry versus Great Weapon Infantry and see what changes have been made. Before we start, I'll give my standard testing disclaimer. Take these tests with a pallet of salt because this isn't how the game works in practice. Tests can be useful and inform our opinions, but the success or failure of a given unit or army depends on many different variables. Most importantly, units rarely and really shouldn't fight in isolation. The purposes of these tests is specifically to determine how effective the cavalry fix is, not to tell you how your cavalry will perform in your battles. Your mileage may vary. With that out of the way, let's get to testing. For each test, I'll do 5 1v1s on Glacial Lake. Ideally, you'd want to test this hundreds of times to account for randomness in attack and armor rolls, but this will do for our purposes today. I'll first show the live patch as a baseline, then the Cavalry beta to see how much difference it makes. Starting with a fairly common interaction, Empire Knights versus Chaos Marauder Grey Weapons. On the live patch, we see 3 Empire Knights win with about 2000 HP remaining on average, and 2 trade, meaning that both the Marauders and Empire Knights are essentially dead afterwards. On the Cavalry beta, all of the Empire Knights win with about 2100 HP remaining. The 2 losing on the first test may have been down to my mistakes during testing, so discarding them, we only see a very slight difference in the average HP remaining for the Empire Knights who won. They do seem to take less damage on the charge, but the overall result isn't much different. Let's find another interaction that will show the changes more clearly. I hadn't realized exactly how bad this interaction was until Falcon clued me into it. This might be one of the worst interactions in the game. Wild Riders versus Bestigor. On the live patch, all the Wild Riders lose badly on the charge. It's not even close. On the Cavalry beta, they're all able to trade with aggressive micro. One survives with about 1000 HP left. Obviously, this is a much bigger difference, going from completely unwinnable to barely winnable with aggressive micro. While this is absolutely a welcome improvement, it's still not ideal. In my view, perfect micro should allow Wild Riders to beat unequally costed infantry. Or, given Bestigor are some of the hardest hitting infantry in the game, maybe this actually makes sense as it is on the beta? Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. For our next test, let's look at a more defensive infantry and cavalry. Although you don't see Reiksguard much, if interactions were better, perhaps you would, especially against a lower DPS great weapon like Longbeards. Since Creative Assembly's intention is to have bracing be better than countercharging, we'll throw in a couple of braced Longbeards in each test as well. On the live patch, the Reiksguard into the unbraced Longbeards trade, whereas the ones charging the braced Longbeards lose convincingly. On the Cavalry beta, Reiksguard into the unbraced Longbeards are able to win a bit more convincingly with just under 1100 HP left on average. And the Reiksguard into the braced Longbeards still lose. In both cases, the braced Longbeards win, which makes sense given their charge defense and mass. For the unbraced, although the beta makes quite a difference, it's still not a cost-effective engagement for the Reiksguard. Now for the next test, how about an even tankier, even harder hitting cavalry versus probably the most common great weapon in the game, Dragon Princes versus Chaos Warriors with great weapons. This time, we'll run a full third test for bracing to see if it benefits a unit without charge defense. On the live patch, Dragon Princes are able to win with about 1330 HP left on average. On the Cavalry beta, Dragon Princes win even more convincingly with just a hair under 1500 HP left on average. Again, we see about an 11% increase in remaining HP for the Cavalry. Certainly better, but still not great. How about bracing though? Bracing up the Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons, on the Cavalry beta, Dragon Princes win with 3200 HP remaining. So based on this, it looks like countercharging is still going to be better for most units. For lower charge or charge defense units, you may want to brace, but everything else should probably still countercharge. Speaking of low charge / charge defense, at the request of Hadriz, I'm including this next test, also because Empire bias. Knights of the Blazing Sun versus Storm Vermin Halberds. Probably should have run this with the Storm Vermin braced, but on both the live patch and the Cavalry beta, this is a pretty terrible engagement for Knights of the Blazing Sun with Storm Vermin countercharging. While the Storm Vermin win with about 3300 HP remaining on average on the live patch, the Cavalry beta does improve that to 3100 HP remaining. I chalk this up largely to their poor defensive stats when compared to other Empire cavalry. At this point, we only have one Empire Heavy Cavalry to talk about, and we need to look at monstrous cavalry. So, enter Demigryph Knights Lances, tested against the best all-around great weapon for the cost, Black Orcs. And this is an atrocious engagement for the Demigryph Knights. Black Orcs easily win with 4600 HP remaining. You could say they stomp. On the Cavalry beta, Black Orcs still win with 2300 HP remaining on average, so certainly, again, we see significant improvement, the Black Orcs losing about 2300 more HP, but importantly, they still beat the Demis, and a 1400 cost AP Elite Shock Cavalry should be able to beat 1150 cost Armored Infantry with good cycle charge. I think that leaves us with a pretty good conclusion. These changes are great, they do help measurably, but it's not enough. Just to hammer home this point though, we'll do one more test with Black Orcs, this time versus Great Stag Knights. Again, as seen with the Demis, the Black Orcs win decisively on the first test with 4300 HP remaining on average. Cavalry beta, that improves to 2400 HP remaining on average. They actually saw less improvement than the Demis, though that might be down to randomness. Regardless, the trend of better but not enough continues. To sum up, it's been interesting to see what the effects of the Cavalry beta changes are. I, for one, would be glad for them to add this as is to the live patch as soon as possible. Cavalry does seem to take less damage on the charge and can survive slightly better. But we need more. Really, we need more. This is not far enough. So please, Creative Assembly, continue to fine-tune these interactions. The rest of you all, subscribe for more Total War Warhammer multiplayer content. Tiny bit of testing here and there, although this is not something I do super often. Just wanted to specifically talk about the beta here. But be sure to subscribe, like the video, share it if you found it helpful, useful, or informative. Thank you all so much again for watching. See you next time.